All right, guys. So thanks for joining us today once again for our live Q&A panel discussion. I am Paul Robinson, the founder and CEO of Construct Reach. We are purposed to build reachable opportunities through construction, and especially as we find ourselves in this unprecedented time with this COVID-19 pandemic that is taking place right now. For us, it's very important that we're able to resource our educators and our students out there. So we've been able to have some amazing live panel discussions over the last 5 weeks. We've talked about opportunities that exist within the construction industries, what you can do to put yourself in position for those opportunities coming out of high school, coming out of college. We've talked about mental health. We've talked about the future of construction. And now, as we are ending up this school year, we're kind of getting to the tail end of the school year. You know, we want to talk about virtual interviews and resume tips. And so we've got an amazing panel here with us today, some very esteemed panelists who have taken the time out of their day, out of their schedule to be with us today. So thanks, guys, for joining us. I'll go ahead and introduce them briefly and kind of let them tell their stories. So first off, we've got Shannon Mcdonald, and he is calling out of Columbus, Indiana with Taylor Brothers Construction. What's up, Shannon? How you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. So briefly, Shannon, just about your career journey, man. We're just gonna kind of go around and I'll introduce you guys like that, and then just kind of share briefly kind of your career journey and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so in 2013, I graduated high school and had decided I was going to go to Indiana University at Bloomington and got into IU School Business, the Kelley School of Business. I was going to study accounting, but a year in, I realized it was too expensive. I didn't want to take out a bunch of student loans and end up with massive student loan debt when I got out. So I came back to Columbus and just tried to figure out my options and take a look at things. I worked a couple factory jobs, those 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. Realized that wasn't for me, so I was like, I gotta desperately get back to school, get back to what I wanted to do, pursue my career. So at that time in 2014, I met Tom Harmon, who's the CEO of Harmon Group, and the connection with him was I tutored at the Columbus Enrichment Program in high school at the church that he attends. So I was able to get connected with him, and he was like, you can have a job with one caveat: you got to go back to school. And we were both on the same page with getting the education. And so at that time in 2014, I attended Ivy Tech and IUPUC, and they hired me at Taylor Brothers as an accounting assistant. So I received my bachelor's degree from Indiana University in accounting. I'm currently pursuing my master's, my MBA in management from Indiana University. I'm currently an accounting analyst with Taylor Brothers. So I've been here 6 years now. And when I started, I knew nothing about construction. And so I've had to work really hard, work relentlessly to understand and figure out the construction industry, because there's a lot to learn, and I'm still learning to this day.
All right, it's good, Shannon, man. Well, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it, man. Next up, we've got Michael B. Kennedy. Michael is calling out of St. Louis, Missouri. He's here in the same city as me, which is cool. So from a proximity standpoint, we're close. He is the CEO of KAI. So thanks for joining us, Michael. How you doing, man?
Doing great. So a little bit about my story. Grew up in St. Louis, left St. Louis and went to, while growing up here in high school, I've always had a little bit of a, sorry, my Alexa is listening to me or something, I don't know, from across the room. Always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. Had a landscaping company in high school that I did with one of my friends. So I got out there and just cut lawns and did mulch and did all that stuff and ran my own business, and we build. And I don't think we ever paid taxes, so don't mention that. It wasn't legally set up. It was just got a trailer and lawnmower and stuff and drove it around and did that. But then I entered an organization called Inroads. And I mention that because these types of things that are offered when we're younger, they somewhat stay with you, and the lessons stay with you your whole life. It's a free program. It's for African Americans, minorities that had over 3.0 GPA in high school. You could get internships with corporations. So I thought about keeping going with the lawn business and ended up going to work GE Capital while going and attending Hampton University. So I went to Hampton in Virginia, HBCU on the East Coast. I call it the Harvard of HBCUs. The real HU, for those out there that might be going to Howard or Hampton, you know which one is the real one, is Hampton. But anyway, I'm gonna keep going. So did 4 years at GE Capital, learned a lot about banking and underwriting. We did small business loans. I worked for the SBA division that also did their CEF, their commercial equipment finance, that worked a lot with contractors. So I work with contractors and manufacturers, refinancing their debt, restructuring their businesses. They had me in a rotation program where I worked in marketing, underwriting, collections, which I learned a lot about why businesses fail, calling a lot of companies and things that got them in trouble, dealing with different economic situations, stuff like COVID. Well, nothing like COVID, but other downturns that impacted their business, how that impacted them. And then when I graduated from college, I went to work for my father, who actually started KAI. Didn't know that's what I was going to do. I thought I was going to do a corporate path, but figured I could always go back into corporate America. And if things didn't work out with my dad, but I wanted to give it a try. We had a good relationship. And after 11 years working with my father, we took our design build firm after and decided to go into self-perform contracting as well. So I started a company called The Up Companies with 2 other partners to do self-perform work for us and others. And now when I started working with my dad, we had about 100 employees. And now all our family of companies, we're about 450 employees around the country, largest design builder in the Midwest that's African-American owned.
That is great. That's great. Well, yeah. Thank you, Michael, for joining us today, man. We really appreciate you taking this time. And next up, we've got Kelly Marshall. Kelly is calling from Chicago, Illinois, and she is with Google. So thanks, Kelly, for joining us today. I see you with the Google shirt on.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me to join this panel. So my background, grew up in Chicago, a proud Jayhawk, so graduate of the University of Kansas, and studied Spanish and psychology. Always thought I was going to go into marriage and family therapy. But grew up with parents in corporate America. My mom was at McDonald's and my dad Motorola. So I was the middle child, the peacekeeper. You know, I really always loved the interpersonal side of the interpersonal dynamic. And so I was like, well, how do you marry business? Like, what's business and people? And someone said, have you heard of HR? And I worked at the pool most summers. So no, I hadn't really heard of HR. So I took a couple classes my senior year, and it was absolutely, for me, it helped me understand how people tick and how organizations can be successful from a collective perspective. So I quickly went to grad school right away. So I went to the University of Minnesota, interned with ExxonMobil, learned really quickly that industry was important. I was kind of just industry agnostic. I love country music, so I thought Houston for the summer sounded great. I ended up joining General Mills full time. So I say I grew up at General Mills. So, you know, did both the manufacturing side, Green Giant Vegetables, Nature Valley granola bars, full parka, hairnet, hard hat, steel toes, all the way to the corporate side doing finance. Spent some time in a union and non-union environment. Ended up on the West Coast with Yoplait Yogurt, fell in love with LA, fell out of love with manufacturing from that perspective. So joined a financial services firm, supported their high net worth sales team, and then ultimately Google came calling about a year and a half ago. So then I relocated back to Chicago, which was never really on my radar, but I now am part of the HR team that supports the cloud technical infrastructure.
Cool. Well, that's great. So as you can see, guys, we've got a very esteemed panel group who's here today. And I wanted to bring up this topic of virtual interviews and resume tips, because, you know, for us, it's about leaning in during this time and still providing resources, post-secondary curriculum and resources for a lot of our students who are out there that are transitioning into the next stage in life, which is young adulthood. And what comes with young adulthood is working as well. And so, you know, trying to discover a career and what you're going to pursue and what sector. And so, of course, you know, we've been leaning in, we've been talking about the construction industry, highlighting that. But actually, when you think about this topic that we have today, Of course, we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about some construction specific things. That's kind of why we have, Michael on. We've got Shannon on, but also just some things that will be helpful and beneficial in general when you're approaching a job or you're applying for a job or position to have an interview. And so we have, HR on. So we've got a full, panel that's kind of hitting it from different angles with, a leader of a company, someone who's a younger adult that's starting his career, and then someone who's in HR. And so when we think about this pandemic and how we've kind of had to really relegate to a lot of virtual meetings, I think it's very relevant to start talking about virtual interviews, right, guys? And so when you think about virtual interviews, it's nothing that's new, but do you guys foresee this being something that becomes more commonplace?
I'll just speak from an industry insider, and then you guys speak maybe more specifically to your experiences. But even when I was at General Mills years ago, the transition to virtual interviews was happening. It was more a cost, right? I mean, companies realized it was just really expensive to go on campus, to do all the job fairs. And so the ROI, I remember that was one of my projects that I did. So I do think this trend will continue, but usually there is like a final on-site. So that's what's going to be really interesting to see if people get comfortable with that. But I do see moving forward, both, from a health and wellness and safety perspective, as well as just a cost efficiency. Companies will lean into this, but will we be able to do without the final in-person? We'll see.
Yeah.
I'll just speak on the fact that it's hard when you build a team that has to go out and they're essential workers to be in the field anyway. You might eliminate and reduce the amount of in-person interviews from a screening standpoint, but when you get down to the final nitty-gritty, they're still gonna have the in-person, because you guys all have to work in person. We can't do our jobs from home. I just read today that Twitter is telling all their employees for forever going forward that they don't have to come back to work. They've invested in the infrastructure. Everybody's working from home. They're just gonna evaluate their real estate and then figure out how many people are actually going to work from home, and then reconfigure their spaces to be more of a gathering spot for when people need to come into the office. And
wow,
more work for us, but I just feel like there's going to be a tremendous amount of TI conversion going forward to anticipate these changes in the workforce. But essential workers, construction, you're definitely still going to have a face-to-face, but I do see us using this tool to eliminate the risk of any transfer or reducing amount of people in your workspace, and get down to, I'm 90% sure I'm going to hire this person. So maybe your first or second interviews will be screened through this, and then say, okay, it's time to come in. Because I feel like you're going to miss some of the verbal cues or some of the cues you get in person versus what somebody can do through the virtual.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Michael. I do think that there are, and that's with everything, right? There's pros and cons to everything, and I mean, those are some good points that you brought out. Do you think, if we look on the pro side of doing, some virtual interviews, does it offer an opportunity that it can serve as a positive that you may not get in a face-to-face interview setting?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I see is you get to see more of the person's background, and that could be a good or a bad thing. So be careful the setting that you're doing the interview in. But a pro could be, finding commonality with somebody, and seeing, something in their background or something about them that's interesting. I would say it's an opportunity where you couldn't do it in a normal interview. Maybe you play an instrument or something that yes, it's nice to have a talent, but it also shows that you're using other aspects of your brain, or you have creativity ability. I mean, it just, if there's certain games you like, there's things that it tells an employer, or the line of questioning you might get that opens up other aspects that might not be related specifically to the job, but they might see that you have other potential. I remember when we were hiring and I started asking people, hey, do you play softball? Because I wanted to win the softball league that we were in. And I was like, wow, you're awesome. And you sort of have a build to you. Do you play softball? And they were like, yeah. I was like, they got an extra point from me because I'm trying to win.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you never know, like when you get a chance to, and maybe it offers the opportunity, like you were alluding to, Michael, to talk about, some more things that make you, right? And, as the more you expound on who you are, you're able to kind of bring in those differentiating factors that could allow you to stand out amongst your peers. And so that could definitely be, one of the advantages of being able to have a virtual interview and kind of bring in more of who you are, maybe through the background or through demonstration or what have you. And then, it seems like it could possibly be an opportunity to level the playing field, right? I know we kind of spoke about this a little bit in our preliminary conversations. I know, Kelly, you kind of brought this up, and maybe Shannon, you can speak to it as well. But do you think that there's an opportunity as well, if you're doing virtual interviews, that it kind of levels the playing field?
Shannon, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think folks prospective employees that aren't as comfortable with the in-person interviews, it gives them a chance to use this platform to showcase, their abilities. For the younger demographic, it allows them to utilize a platform that they're used to. They're used to FaceTiming, they're used to the TikTok, they're used to the technology. They might not be as comfortable with the in-person or face-to-face traditional interview, but certainly the Zoom or the Google Hangout or whatever platform for the virtual interview, it allows them to be more comfortable in that perspective. More introverted people are can show that it levels that playing field for them, definitely.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think we all have different insecurities, right? And to Shannon's point, there are some demographics, I work at Google, right? So you think that like we do technology well, but there's a lot of us that actually don't do the technology part. And so we're still clunky with the technology and the AV. And so, you may get on your interview and the interviewer may be struggling with their sound, or you may be struggling with yours. And so just your ability to be agile, and maybe you help them troubleshoot, or they help you, like, that's okay. Like, expect those things. I think the virtual interview really humanizes people. I mean, we've all seen, whether it's on the news or on Zooms we've been on, or Google Hangouts, Meet, no one's on Zoom. Kids run through, dogs run through, someone knocks on the door, like that stuff happens. And so I think that's what's really nice about the virtual. It just takes I think a little bit of the pressure off. I mean, it's still an interview, it's still important, but like if you're nervous, you can be shaking your foot under the table and I would have no idea. And that's fine, right? Because that's not like who you are as an employee, that's just how we manage nerves. So I think from that perspective, even interviewers get nervous too. So I think keep that in mind.
I think I'd add to that is one I forgot to say last time is do make sure that you don't have political or other biases or controversial things in your background that somebody, so if you want to keep the level playing field, don't have your, favorite politicians or whatever behind you, because that person on the other side might not agree with you, and then automatically they have a bias in their head. So, keep those things out of it, unless somebody just really hates baseball or softball or something, but I doubt that's something. But, try to keep it more personal to common items that you would show in your background. The other thing is, the first thing I thought of when you asked that question about a level playing field is that TV show on Netflix, Love is Blind. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but what they have, that's the true level playing field if you could not see the other person. So I don't know. I mean, I think that would be the most, and then you guys meet each other after you selected them really based on their conversation and qualifications, because you have no way of seeing anything to have any thoughts about that person's skin color, background, anything.
There's some companies that are getting away from the name, like they won't even include the name on a resume, so they literally truly do it blind to try to help mitigate that, because
exactly.
And that's
exactly
that's very good that you have companies that are kind of beginning to take that initiative, because sometimes you just have biases that, you don't even think about. They just come naturally. And so, to be more intentional, to guard yourself against, your own blind spots as an employer, that could help as well, by being able to take names away. And so, no, that's very good. And Shannon, you said something earlier that I really wanted to kind of highlight, man, because I thought that was very good. If you're more adept to being online and you're more adept to having, kind of screen conversations with people because you've grown up in this digital community, if you will, and technology has just kind of always been at the forefront of your life and the center of your life, sometimes when you have the first interview, that's when you're like the most nervous. And so being able to have the first interview and that be a virtual interview, it's coming across in a platform that you're more comfortable in. And so, you get a chance to be a little bit more confident because it's through a platform, it's through a medium that you've been used to, pretty much your entire life. And then if it progresses to an in-person meeting, now you've already had an encounter with not only that company, but maybe even the same personnel. And so now you go into a second conversation a little bit more comfortable because you've already had that initial conversation, and thus you could be a little bit more confident going in. And so that could be a benefit. Oh, that's good. That is good. No, great conversation, guys. And so we see that, virtual interviews can provide some very unique opportunities in terms of being able to differentiate yourself, to kind of rise above your peers. And so definitely taking in some of these nuggets that we're getting from our panelists and incorporating those, especially during this time where you're probably going to have to do, at least on the front end, right, the first stage or the first step is some virtual interviews. So hopefully you guys are really taking in this. They're offering some very good insight. So as we look to resume building, right, what are some aspects that make a strong resume? I know, being in HR and being an owner of a company, you guys are probably very, very accustomed to resumes coming across your desk. Guys, let's talk a little bit about that. Like what makes a strong resume?
Yeah, I think it's different things for different jobs, right? And I think one of the caveats that I want to make sure that I share is, like, I'm big corporate America, right? General Mills, the Capital Group, and Google. So my perspective is more probably, or my experience is more tailored in that department. So take everything everybody says, depending on, what your situation is. So for me, I'm not a cover letter person. Again, the way Google is, we just get so many resumes, and so we just don't have a ton of time. So I really look for kind of specific keywords, and I tell people, like, especially early career, one page, right? I love to see some leadership, especially if you don't have a ton of work experience. I love to see results. Strong verbs, strong words, those are really important. Not buzzwords per se, but like strong, actionable words. I think just like a really clean format is the first thing I look for. If you have like tried to shove everything on one page and it's like 0.8 font, you're probably going to lose me from right there. So there is a thing to the format. I'm just going to be completely honest. Yeah. So again, maybe front and back, I'll defer to Michael a little bit, depending on his perspective. But for me, if you have less than like 5 years professionally, I think you should be able to cover it in one page. But again, if you don't have the work experience, the captain on the sports team or the honor society or the yearbook club, like those things do tell us something about you. So don't be too caught up in the like, oh, I don't have all this great work experience. We know that, right? Your early career. So we look for different ways to understand who you are as a person. And I'm okay with a short summary at the top. Don't let it get too long, or the like summary of skills. If you're mid-career, again, it can be a little bit longer, but again, I like to see results. Metrics are huge for Google in terms of how they screen resumes, and we use a fair amount of artificial intelligence. So, we're looking for specific keywords. So again, if you're going for a bigger company, they may be using that sort of a screening process.
For me, it's sort of opposite, because she's getting hundreds of thousands of resumes from all over the country, from people who just want to move to Chicago. Like, I want to work for a Google in Chicago. And I mean, so, our company is so much smaller that when we do a job posting, we might get 30 resumes or 20. And, you know, I think if somebody just sent me a generic resume, that I could tell just they send it out to everybody, but somebody who actually took the time to understand the position and say that they following our company and I know what you're asking me to do. So the cover letter does stand out a little more for us. And then especially in construction to see that you do have communication skills and writing ability, that's the this everybody thinks it's a building business. This is a communication business. Construction is nothing but communication, and the lack of communication is what gets you in trouble, or your inability to communicate what you're trying to do, even at the lowest level of the job site. You know, if you can't communicate, you're the weakest link on this job site, because they'll say, well, I assumed, or I thought, or what I was trying to say was, that's not what I meant to say. That's trouble. That could be somebody's life, and that's serious business. So, you know, being able to see that someone can communicate, they understand our company, they've been following us, and they understand our branding, and they want to be a part of that culture, and they could be a good fit in our culture. That's I'm not asking for a 3-page essay, but that's something succinct you should be able to say in a paragraph, or maybe 2 at most. And then the actual resume, I concur with Kelly that, you know, leadership skills, you know, keywords, strong verbs, all of those things are great. Confidence. It shows that you formatting is huge, and I know that's not really. We have an architectural engineering company too, so on our architecture and design side, those designers, you know, really, man, those are some of the best resumes I've ever seen. They are just awesome artistically, but the way they format them. Some people send us CDs that you can do a live PDF and 3D. I mean, they got some crazy stuff, but it shows you a lot about that person with the very creative side. We don't see that on a GC side and self-perform, but we've seen a whole spectrum of different types of resumes, and we're drawn to some of the individuality. You can definitely tell a difference before you even meet the person by how they communicate through their resume.
I think one thing I would build off that is make sure you're not using acronyms that only you know, right? So the pressure test is like, and again, you want to tailor it to the job, but sort of assume that maybe the person reading the resume isn't like super deep in the industry, and so they should be able to understand what you're saying, especially if you're making an industry switch. Make sure that the verbiage you use is understandable to kind of anyone who might look at it. So pressure test it against your neighbor, your aunt, your cousin who doesn't really, you know, speak the language of the world that you've operated in. That's just a good way to make sure that like you're clear and it's understandable to anyone.
Yeah, and I echo those sentiments and those perspectives, because I know, especially in the business world, a 1-page resume is plenty. Employers don't really like to see, you know, their prospects jumping from job to job. So the one page resumes is solid. And I also think constantly updating it is also important, with different experiences, different promotions, and job titles that you have. I think, you know, with those, you know, you need to continue to update your resume. And I also think, you know, you need to include experiences that are relevant or pertinent to that industry. As Kelly mentioned, tailor it to that job, that company that you're applying to, or companies. I think that's also important. And I think avoiding words like loyal or hardworking, energetic, punctual, motivated, team player. I think those aren't tangible. I think including words like developed, like I developed a program at my former job. I achieved this. I managed a team of 6, or initiated. You know, I initiated this process at my former company. I think those are tangible, and those show, you know, that this person actually did do something. So I think avoiding those words that I mentioned, and then including those other words that kind of back up what you're talking about or what you're about, is important as well.
Yeah, I think it's also important. I'm glad you mentioned that, Shannon, because it seems as if, you know, as the landscape of business is changing, then of course, you know, you want to make sure that your resumes are keeping in line with some of those changes. And so, you know, being able to not use maybe the buzzwords, as you would say, Kelly, that we are traditionally accustomed to having on a resume, where you can have several that come across your desk, Michael, and they may all say like the same 10 words, right? And so being able to really speak specifically, and that was kind of a segue into the next question, was like, what's the best way to really speak about your experience, especially if you're constantly updating that resume? Because I'm sure, you know, you wouldn't really advise them to just kind of list what they've done, but list, you know, maybe your particular role in that aspect and maybe what it led to. Or if you did initiate that, make sure that you point that out, or the type of impact or the type of value that you were able to create, or maybe what was the ROI based on your role and responsibility, not necessarily just listing it, right? Because you want to be able to kind of speak to, you know, and brag on yourself a little bit, you know, but speak to like the change that you're able to bring and the value that you're able to bring into a company, right?
There's a really simple method that I coach people to do. It's called STAR. So what was the situation? You know, I was asked to develop a project to analyze, you know, the cost benefit, the ROI of, you know, going on campus to 20 different campuses around the US versus moving into, you know, virtual, you know. So what was the task? So here's what I had to do. I had to pull all this data. I figured out how many people went on the team. I looked at hotels, I looked at travel fees, you know, action. Then here's how I did the analysis, and then what was the result, right? So that's what I coach people more when they were doing the verbal, right? So that's a 2 to 3 minute probably response, but take that and be like, how do I get that into kind of one bullet and maybe two? But just that framework, I think, is just helpful to keeping yourself clear on what are the things to highlight.
Very good, very good. And this is good, guys. So we're at the point now to where we like to start taking in some questions from our viewers who are out there. So we'll give just a couple of seconds for you guys to kind of put together a couple of questions to ask our panel, and then we'll go into some Q&A. Y'all ready for that?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see.
Yep.
All right, first question is, with the move toward more technology involved in future virtual meetings and interviews, how should those skills be showcased on a resume? So how should their actual skills be showcased? But I guess Kelly kind of answered that question a little bit about the STAR. Is there any other additional things that you guys want to add?
I mean, you know, when people talk about their proficiency in different software or skills, you can just list those softwares and how many years or how much time and experience or hours, man hours. Everybody talks about man hours a lot. So you could say, hey, I have over 1,000 man hours in working in Procore, or I have 1,000 man, you know, I've done Zoom for 36 months or wait, what's the Google one? I'm sorry.
Google Meet.
Meet.
Google Meet.
Yeah.
I think, you know, guys, got to check me on this. I think the ability, okay, I'm going to show some bias perhaps, but to some degree, when I hear that question, some of those things are just like the ticket to entry, right? Like, I think we sort of assume to some degree that there's some level of proficiency. Again, depends on the industry, but that folks can kind of navigate a Meet or a Zoom or some of that virtual technology versus the core software that's required maybe for the job a little bit. So I guess I don't necessarily feel like I need to see that on a resume. I think what Michael referred to, that like job specific experience with software, is way more important. So I would say I wouldn't focus too much on, you know, fluency in Meets or Zoom or personally, I'm not sure if that was the question. I think that's kind of what I heard, but yeah, the more job specific stuff is more important.
Good. Let's see. Next question.
How does the usage of social media platforms play into the hiring process?
Oh, how does media play into the hiring process?
Yeah, I will say some people did not get hired once we saw their social media. So I'll let Kelly go in on that. I'm sure you guys can break through everyone's passwords.
Okay. I was waiting for the first shot across the aisle. Yeah, I'll be honest. I look at LinkedIn more than I look at anything else. I mean, when I hear a name, I mean, I'll do a quick search, and if their Facebook pops up, like I'll take a peek. I think in today's world, most people, their Facebook is pretty clean. Obviously, I can't really find you on I guess if your account is open at Instagram. I don't go down the rabbit hole. I try to just meet you and form my own opinion. And if I need additional data points, or if I'm getting a weird vibe, maybe I'll do greater, searching. But just be smart. Come on, guys. Guys, gals, just be smart.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's out there, right? So it's out there. And, but go ahead, Shannon. Now you're about to say something. I don't want to cut you off.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you see today a lot of these sports, these players that are getting drafted, they'll go back to social media from, years and years ago. I mean, it's something that somebody said when they were a teenager, and maybe they didn't understand at the time, or they don't understand how certain things work. But that certainly has an effect on you getting a certain position. So you definitely need to watch what you say, as they were alluding to, and be cognizant of that, because that could implicate you. That could cost you a job or a career. It's going to affect your finances. So I think you definitely have to be mindful of that when you're going to hit that post, because once it's out there for everybody to see. No matter if you have a private social media account or not. So just be careful.
I do think that some of us, some of the younger, like the group on this call that are doing hiring, we understand, what being a kid is, and probably how difficult it is in today's world to just be a kid. People make mistakes. If I had everything documented that I did in high school and college, I'd be in trouble. Yeah. But you just have to be cognizant that all your friends are recording. They might not always be your friends all the time. It's a difficult, world that you're in. And we move accordingly because we're already in our careers and we've already adjusted. But when you just had a carefree, I didn't have a cell phone until I was 21 years old. So it's and they couldn't record anything. Yeah. And I had to buy minute cards. So I don't understand what it would be like being 13 with a high powered device to record and post immediately, not thinking about this is going to be pulled up, 10 years from now when I'm getting drafted by the NFL. So.
Yeah, very good points, guys.
Yeah, you're always a I think the employer perspective is you're always a representative of the company on or off the clock. And so how do you want to be portraying yourself? And what's the perception you want out there? So yeah, as Shannon said, just be super cognizant, and that's just a good life lesson, regardless of employer.
It is. Let's see. Any other questions?
So we talked about how different applicants send maybe similar resumes. What have you guys seen as far as different attributes or pieces of what they present to you, whether that's in the interview or on paper, that really set them apart?
So what have you guys seen that really sets candidates apart?
I'll say for me, communication is key. Verbal communication for me, and just energy. Because what I would say is even though it's virtual, some of the same rules apply. There is still an etiquette, right? There's still you need to demonstrate active listening. If you don't understand the question, just rephrase it to make sure you're clear, so you're not, rambling. Really focused answers and saying, hey, did that answer your question? If you're not sure. So really showing super high engagement is key for me, especially on a virtual interview. And then I do some follow-up questions that are pretty specific and pointed, not the general 30,000 feet question. Because again, that just shows a greater level of probably engagement. And, but again, smile, I love a smile. Again, if that's who you are, if you're not a smiler, that's okay. But that energy exchange is important, because you do lose kind of that natural energy feel that you'd have face-to-face.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And don't make. Gotcha.
Oh, I was just going to say, again, with the resume, make sure the achievements are measurable. Don't just put something on there just for filler. In terms of the virtual interviews, I think you have to approach it similar to how you would approach an in-person traditional interview. you want to approach it that same way. So just those key couple tips, and again, as Kelly had mentioned, STAR are important.
Good,
And
good.
if you don't have a good answer, don't make it up. Just say, hey, I actually haven't had an experience like that, but if I were, here's how I think I would answer it, right? I would much rather you say that to me than like sort of kind of create something. And I really encourage people to have just like pick 3 to 5 specific experiences you've had, whether it's project work or work experience, like 3 kind of bigger ones that if I ask you about communication, you can like reposition it to focus that on that. If you're asked about conflict resolution, you can highlight that, because a lot of people like try to come up with 10 different examples in their head. I don't need 10 different examples. You can take 3 to 5 consistent ones, but just focus on different aspects of it. So it allows me to see more deeply into the actual experience, and it highlights different behaviors, which is ultimately what I'm looking for.
Good, good. Let's see, 2 more questions. All right.
What are absolute deal breakers to avoid on the resume or red flags?
Michael, I'm gonna pitch this over to you. You see more resumes. Deal breakers.
Yeah.
Deal breakers in the resume.
Yeah.
Well, obviously an easy deal breaker is you don't know the position you're applying for. I've had that too. They're just sending their resume in because they want a job. They don't know what they want to do when you sit down in front of them. Like, I don't really know what I want to do. It's like, well, you need to have some idea of why you're sitting here. I think when you're reading in a resume and I guess a visual deal breaker, not something when we're doing our checking, because we find out that they're overstating their experience. I think if you overstate what you've done and your capabilities, or it doesn't make sense, or I could tell you didn't know what you were even writing, but you were trying to say you were proficient in something, some of that stuff sticks out like a sore thumb on the resume. So, be honest, but show, like Kelly said, show that you have the ability to grow and you want to be trained, and say, my desire is to want to be this is my goal, but don't say you've done it.
That's good. That's good. Let's see. And last question.
Last question. Should I add my picture on my resume or not?
No. Absolutely not.
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
All right, kids. No pictures. Right.
I mean, I'd be curious, like, what do they think they're trying to achieve with that? I don't know. We can go back to that person, but I'd be curious.
Yeah, but it's something that, especially when, you think about the audience coming out into the first time, that's just, hey, do I add it or no? And
yeah, right.
I think it kind of makes sense, right, when you think about the generation that's asking the question, because everything to this point has been profile pic when you're doing something.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, all I know is a profile pic, right, that associate my bio or something about me, right? So it's always accompanied. They're always together. So that's a very good question, but it shows the kind of the younger generation and, the times in which they've grown up in. And it's a little bit different than ours, as Mike was, dating himself a little bit, which I can definitely relate to, right? So it's just kind of like, yeah, man, like times have changed a bit. So
I think one other thing to consider, and Shannon, I think you're trying to chime in, so I'm gonna tee it to you, but the resume, collaboration is so important, and this is something that's going to be highlighted and stretched and challenged, I think, in this virtual world, depending on how much longer we all work remotely. And I think, again, a lot of us use less paper than we used to. We do more virtual meetings here and there for a global company. But there is something about kind of the sitting in a conference room, whiteboarding, knocking something out together. So I think, where you've had really good collaboration experiences, so I'm fine seeing like co-led, co-created. And so, resumes that are like me, I'm like, oh, can this person play nice in the sandbox with others and help lead and delegate? Those things are really important to highlight as well. Shannon, did you have something you wanted to add in?
No, that's a good point. I was kind of allude to that a little bit. Just the communication again, having that, showcasing that on the resume. I think what Paul was saying about the profile picture and that just being something that the younger demographic and the younger generation is just used to doing. It's something that they'll have to get used to not including, because I agree it shouldn't be included. So definitely, again, it's a great question, understanding what shouldn't be on a resume, understanding what needs to, what that company is looking for, understanding the position, and as Michael was talking about, that you're applying for, because it's going to show pretty early once you get hired that if you lied on the resume and you don't understand the job and you're not qualified, you're not going to last very long. And I think understanding you can't just push restart on the video game. It's not like that on, when you submit a resume and you get hired, you can't just push restart. So understanding that is definitely important.
And I think leverage your network, just to kind of bring it home in the overall process. Leverage your network. It is important. Who really can be advantageous. And so don't hesitate to reach out to say, hey, could we just have a quick virtual cup of coffee? I'd love to understand more about the role, even before you apply. I'd rather someone pick my brain about the role before they, take up my time to read their resume and do a full-on interview. So encourage you just to being scrappy sometimes when you're just trying to get your foot in the door is an okay approach if you're respectful and transparent with what you're trying to achieve in those interactions.
Good. Well, no, that is very good insight, guys. We had a very good conversation. Just want to say, thanks again to our panelists for being with us today as we talk through virtual interviews and resume tips. We definitely want to make sure that, we let you know that even within Construct Reach, like that's what we do within our social app, is being able to provide these opportunities that exist, the opportunity to network with other industry professionals, to bring those two demographics into the same space, right? So that conversations can extend and advice and insight and tips can extend beyond this setting right here. So definitely leverage that. You can visit us at constructreach.com. You'll see all of these different prompts to enter into the social network. And we've actually collaborated with the state of Wisconsin as well. So it's an organization in Wisconsin. It's called Inspire. And they're actually doing a resume and mock interview workshop all through next week. So look for those posts on our social media pages as we just kind of provide more resources to you guys to put yourselves in position to continue to move forward and go into a career that you have a desire to enter into, but to actually, prep and do the necessary work beforehand to set yourself up for success and kind of rise above your peers to stand out. So thank you guys for tuning in today. Thank you, panelists, for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Anytime.